The first thing the alien doctor said when he saw my body was that no human had ever survived this. He said it the way a man reads a weather report, flat, certain, already moving on to the next slide. He had 4 fingers on each hand and a 5th that folded into the palm like a thumb that didn't trust itself. He used them to peel back the field shroud they'd zipped me into and to count, in his own language, the holes in me. I counted along in mine. We both got to 7 and stopped at the same time, which I took as a kind of agreement. The hole below my collarbone was the one he kept coming back to. He pressed 2 fingers against the skin around it and watched the bubble of blood lift and fall with my breath, and his second eyelid, the wet, slow one, slid sideways across his eye and then back, and he said the line again. Quieter this time, like he was trying to convince himself. Humans don't survive this. I wanted to tell him about my mother. I wanted to tell him about the song she used to hum at the sink, the one with no words, the one that had stayed in my mouth for 20 years and was still there now, lining the back of my teeth like a coin I'd been saving. I wanted to tell him the only reason I was still on his table was that I had a delivery to make and I hadn't made it yet. But my tongue was swollen and the room was very bright and the doctor was making a note in the air above my chest with a stylus that left no mark I could see, and I thought, if I close my eyes for 1 second, just one, he wins. So I didn't. 8 days earlier, my mother stood at the kitchen sink with her sleeves rolled up to the elbow and her score on the wall behind her in the little black square they'd bolted there when I was 12. The number was 312. It had been 318 the week before. It had been 401 the year my father was alive. Don't look at it, she said, without turning. It's rude to look at someone's score in their own kitchen. I'm not looking at it. You're looking at it. I was looking at it. She rinsed a plate and set it in the rack and rinsed another and set it in the rack, and the little black square behind her flickered the way the cheap ones did when the building's grid hiccuped. And for a half-second the number went to 311, and then back to 312. And she pretended she hadn't seen it, but the muscle in her jaw moved once, the way it did when she was deciding not to cry. Mama, eat your bread. Mama, the summons. Eat your bread, Myro. She had folded the summons into the bottom of the bread box under the heel of the loaf, where she put things she did not want me to look at and knew I would look at anyway. It was a thin sheet of polymer with the Concord's mark in the corner, the 7-petaled bloom that was meant to represent the 7-member species and looked, to me, like a hand with a finger missing. The text was in their script and ours, side by side. Reassignment notice. Citizen HANA VRBA, Compliance Index 312, report to Labor Allocation Office 14J on the 9th day of the 10th month for processing. No personal effects required. That last line, no personal effects required. The Concord said it like a kindness. They said a lot of things like a kindness. Reassignment to where? I said. Eat your bread. To where, Mama? She turned. Her hands were still wet. She wiped them on her apron and then on the apron again, and she looked at me with the look she had used since I was 4 years old. The look that meant the answer was none of my business, and also that she loved me, and also that she was tired. They didn't say, she said. They never say. They didn't say. I put the summons back in the bread box. I covered it with the heel of the loaf the way she had. We ate the bread without speaking, and the little black square watched us eat. And outside in the corridor, someone was being walked down the stairs by 2 of the long-legged Concord enforcers, the kind with the joint that bends backward at the knee, and we listened to the bootsteps go down 4 flights and into the street, and we did not look up from the bread. After supper, I went out onto the balcony to smoke a cigarette that wasn't a cigarette, because real tobacco had been a Class 3 import for 6 years, and the rolled paper husks they sold us at the kiosks were filled with something the clerks called leaf substitute, and tasted like the inside of a vacuum bag. Juraj was already there. He lived 3 doors down, and he had a key to our balcony, because my mother had given him one when his own mother died, and he didn't want to be alone in his apartment in the evenings. He was leaning on the rail with his elbows out and his head down, and the orange end of his fake cigarette making the only warm color in the whole gray courtyard. "You saw the paper," he said. "How did you know?" "Your face. That obvious. Always." We stood and smoked, and the courtyard below us had 2 street lamps, one of which had been out since spring, and a Concord patrol drone hung in the air above the broken one, because the broken one was the dark spot, and the Concord did not like dark spots. The drone made the sound a refrigerator makes when it is thinking about whether to start. We had stopped hearing it years ago, and only noticed it now because Juraj had brought the silence with him, the heavy silence he carried these days, the silence of a man with a plan he had not yet said out loud. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow what?" "Tomorrow night, the slip." He did not have to explain what the slip was. Everyone in the compliance zone knew what the slip was. There was a place, 300 kilometers east, where the perimeter ran along an old riverbed, and the sensor density was supposed to be lower because the ground was wet half the year, and the Concord's ground sensors did not like water. There was a man in the city who knew a man in a village, who knew a woman in a barn who would drive you most of the way for the right number of ration tokens. There was a window every 28 days when the orbital sweep that watched the perimeter was angled 3 degrees south for refueling, and during that window a person could, if they were quick and lucky and stupid in the right ways, walk through the kill zone and come out on the other side in the free quarter in Zelen, where no one had a score on the wall and the bread had real flour in it, and a man could say the word Concord out loud in a cafe without 3 of his neighbors filing reports. A person could do that, yes. A lot of persons had tried. The bodies were left in the kill zone on purpose. The Concord called it a passive deterrent display. We called it the field. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow." "I can't." "I know." "My mother." "I know." He didn't argue. That was the worst of it. He had been my friend since we were 6 years old, and he had argued with me about everything from the rules of football to the correct way to slice an onion. And the one thing he wouldn't argue with me about was my mother, because he had loved her too, and he knew exactly what she was worth in the only currency that mattered, which was not the number on the wall. "I'll send for you," I said. "From the other side, when I'm settled, I'll send for her." "There are channels." "There are channels." There are, Myro." He looked at me when he said my name, and his face in the orange light was the face of a man who has already done the arithmetic and is sparing you the answer. And I knew then that I was lying to him, and he was letting me lie because that was the kindness he had left to give. We finished the cigarettes that weren't cigarettes. He put his out on the rail. I put mine out on the rail next to his, and the 2 black smudges on the white paint looked like a colon, like the start of a sentence that had not been written yet. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow." The kiosk on Marshall Street was called Unity of the Future. They were all called Unity of the Future. There were 1,100 of them in the city, and they all had the same paint and the same shelves and the same clerk, more or less. A woman of indeterminate age in a gray smock with the 7-petaled bloom over her heart, who recited the daily affirmation when you walked in and the daily price when you walked out. Our Marshall Street clerk was named Dana. She had been there 9 years. She had a son my age who had tried to slip the perimeter 4 years ago and had not come back, and was on no list anywhere because no list was kept of the ones who did not come back. And she knew that I knew, and I knew that she knew, and we had never once said a word about it to each other. I came in for soap and lamp oil and 3 ration tokens of leaf substitute, and Dana said, "Welcome, citizen." "The Concord provides," and I said, "The Concord provides," and she scanned my wrist and the number came up on her little screen, 487, and she gave the smallest nod, the kind that wasn't a nod, the kind that was a held breath. "Soap," I said. "Aisle 2. I went to aisle 2. The soap was in bars the color of wet cardboard and smelled like nothing. I took 2. I went to aisle 3 for the lamp oil, and aisle 1 for the leaf, and when I came back to the counter, Dana was alone, because the only other customer, an old man in a long coat, had taken his bread and gone, and the drone in the corner of the ceiling was watching the door and not the counter. And Dana looked at me and said, very quietly, in the voice she used for prices, "My boy used to say it was the water." The water. In the east, where the river is, the ground sensors. He said his friend told him about the water. I looked at her. She was scanning the soap. Beep, beep. "He was wrong," she said. "He was wrong about the water." Beep, the lamp oil. "It's not the water that makes the gap. It's the wind. There's a wind in the gully in the autumn from the north. It pushes the chaff from the corn down through the sensors, and the sensors mistake the chaff for movement, and the system runs hot and culls itself for 40 minutes every hour at sundown for 2 weeks in the 10th month." Beep, the leaf. "He learned this," she said, "after." She did not say after what. "That will be 4 tokens, citizen." I paid. She bagged. She handed me the bag, and on top of the bag, where the receipt should have been, there was a folded square of gray paper that was not a receipt, and she pressed the bag into my hands and held it there 1 second longer than she needed to. "The Concord provides," she said. "The Concord provides." I walked out of the kiosk and did not open the square of paper until I was 4 streets away in the stairwell of an empty block where the cameras had been broken since the riots. The square was a map, a piece of a map, the eastern perimeter, the riverbed, the gully, the corn, a wind arrow drawn in pencil, a time, 1840, a date, the 11th. The 11th was 3 days after my mother's reassignment. I sat on the stairs in the stairwell for a long time with the map in my hand and the bag of soap on the step next to me, and I did the arithmetic Juraj had spared me from doing the night before, and I did it twice, and it came out the same both times. If I went on the 9th with Juraj, my mother went to allocation office 14J alone. If I went on the 11th, on Dana's wind, my mother had already gone wherever they sent her 2 days before. There was no version of the math where I left and she stayed. There was only a version where I left and pretended. I went home. I did not tell Juraj about the map. I did not tell my mother about anything. I made supper, potatoes, the gray ones with the eyes that grew back overnight, and we ate, and she hummed at the sink while she washed the pot, the song with no words, and I sat at the table and listened the way you listen to a thing you are about to lose, which is to say, very carefully, and from a small distance, the distance you have already begun to put between yourself and the thing. She caught me listening. "What?" "Nothing. You're looking at me. It's not rude to look at your mother in her own kitchen." She laughed. She had a small laugh, my mother. The laugh of a woman who had been told for a long time that her laugh was too loud and had quieted it the way you quiet a kettle, by taking it off the fire. "Myro." "Yes, Mama." "If anything ever." "Mama." "If anything ever, I want you to." "Mama, eat your potatoes." She ate her potatoes. The number on the wall behind her was 312 still. I watched it for a long time that night and it did not move, and I thought, that is the number she will die under, and then I thought, no, it isn't, because I am going to go through a gully in 3 days and I am going to send for her, and the number is going to be 900 by the time she comes across, and she is going to laugh again, really laugh, the kettle back on the fire. I believed it the way a man believes a song he is humming, which is to say, while the song lasts. The night before the 9th, Juraj came over for the last time. He brought a bottle of something the color of weak tea that he had been saving for an occasion, and the occasion was now, and we sat on the balcony with my mother on the kitchen side of the door, pretending not to listen, and we drank the weak tea that was not tea and watched the drone over the broken street lamp do its slow refrigerator hum. "You're not coming," he said. "I'm not coming. You're going the other route, the 11th. I looked at him, he shrugged. "Dana's boy was my cousin," he said, "twice removed. The whole street knew about the wind. I was going to tell you tomorrow if you didn't tell me first." "Juraj. Don't. Juraj, if you make it, you send for her. If I make it, I send for you both. If neither of us makes it, we owe each other nothing because there will be nothing to owe with." He held up his cup. I held up mine. We touched the rims, and the rims made the small, dry sound that cheap cups make, and we drank what was in them, and that was the closest I came to saying goodbye to him. Inside, my mother had stopped pretending not to listen. She came out onto the balcony in her slippers and her dressing gown, and she stood between us and put one hand on Juraj's cheek and one hand on mine, and she did not say anything for a long time. The drone hummed. The street lamp that worked buzzed. Somewhere far off a dog barked, which was a thing you did not often hear in the compliance zone because dogs counted as undeclared biomass and had to be registered, and most people did not bother. "Both of you," she said. "Both of us what, Mama? Both of you come back. Mama. Both of you come back." She kissed Juraj on the forehead, and then she kissed me on the forehead, and she went back inside and closed the balcony door, and we heard her hum the song with no words, 3 notes of it, before she stopped. Juraj left an hour before dawn. I watched him from the balcony go down the courtyard with his small bag and his coat, and his shoulders set the way they had been set since we were boys, the slight forward lean, the way he walked into wind even when there was none. He did not look up. I did not call down. The drone over the broken street lamp watched him go and did not record him because he was, on paper, going to the early shift at the assembly hall, and his wrist scan said so, and the paper was the truth as far as the drone was concerned. On the 9th, my mother went to Labor Allocation Office 14J. She put on her good blouse and the shoes with the heels that hurt her, and she packed nothing because the summons said no personal effects required. And at the door she stopped and turned and looked at me the way she had looked at me the night of my father's funeral, which was the look that said she was about to be a person without a husband, and she would prefer not to be a person without a son in the same week. "I'll be home for supper," she said. "For supper? I'll make the potatoes. I'll buy them. There are some in the bin. I'll buy fresh." She put her hand on my face. Her hand was cold. Her hand was always cold, even in summer, even when the kitchen was full of steam. "Eat your bread, Myro. Mama, eat your bread." She went. I watched her from the window go down the courtyard and out onto Marshall Street and turn left at the corner and disappear behind the kiosk that was called Unity of the Future. And I stood at the window for a long time after she was gone, with my hand on the glass where the print of her hand should have been. She did not come home for supper. The bin under the sink had 3 potatoes in it. I cooked them. I ate one. The other 2 I left on the plate at her place at the table with a fork. The black square on the wall behind her chair said 312, and then, an hour later, 304, and then, 2 hours later, nothing. The screen went black and stayed black, the way screens did when the citizen they referenced had been reclassified out of the citizen registry into one of the categories that did not have a score. I sat at the table with the cold potatoes on her plate until the lamp oil ran out. When the oil was gone, I sat in the dark. The dark in our kitchen was not a true dark because the courtyard street lamp that worked threw a yellow stripe in through the window, and the stripe fell on the table in the same place it had fallen every night of my life, across the corner where my father had put his elbow when he was alive, and across the corner where my mother put hers now. The stripe was the only thing in the room that did not know anything had changed. The stripe fell where it always fell. The drone in the courtyard hummed where it always hummed. The dog that wasn't supposed to be a dog barked twice, somewhere, and went quiet. I went into my mother's room. I had not been in my mother's room since I was a boy. She had kept the door closed in the way she kept the bread box closed, which was to say she had kept it as a place where she put what she did not want me to look at and knew I would look at anyway. Only she had kept this door closed longer, and I had been better about it than I had been about the bread box. I had not looked. For years I had not looked. I looked now. The room was small. The bed was made. On the chair by the window there was a folded blouse that was not the good blouse. The good blouse she had worn to the allocation office. But another one, an older one, with a small mend at the cuff that I remembered her doing one winter by lamplight when she thought I had been asleep. On the shelf above the bed there was a row of small things, a comb, a wooden spool, a clay bird the size of my thumb that I had made for her at school when I was 7, and that I had assumed she had thrown away because mothers, I had thought then, threw away the clay birds. She had not. The clay bird was on the shelf above the bed where she could see it from the pillow. Under the bed, in a tin that had once held the kind of biscuits no one made anymore, she had kept 3 things. A photograph of my father, a photograph of me at 4 years old, in a coat I did not remember owning, holding the hand of a woman I did not recognize at first and then, after a long second, recognized as her, my mother, at an age younger than I was now. And a small folded paper, soft from being folded and unfolded for a long time, on which she had written, in a hand I knew so well I could have read it with my eyes closed, the lyrics to the song with no words. The song had words. She had never sung them to me. She had only ever hummed. But she had written them down, in pencil, on a paper she kept in a biscuit tin under her bed. And the paper was soft because she had unfolded it and refolded it for years, alone in this room, while I had been on the other side of the wall thinking she was asleep. I read the words once. I did not read them twice. I folded the paper back along its old creases and put it in the inner pocket of my coat, on the opposite side from where the scanner would go the next day, and I put the tin back under the bed and the bedskirt back over the tin, and I went out of the room and closed the door, and I sat at the table in the yellow stripe of the courtyard light until the morning came. The 11th came. I went east in the back of a hay truck that smelled like diesel and old animal, and the driver was a woman with one eye who did not give me her name and did not ask for mine, and she let me out at a road that was no longer a road, in a field of corn that had been left to dry on the stalk because there was no one to harvest it anymore, and she said, "The wind comes at 6:40. If you can't see the gully from where you stand at 6:35, you are not where I left you, and that is your problem, not mine," and she drove away without looking back. I stood in the corn. The corn was taller than me. The stalks knocked against each other in the still air and made the dry whisper that corn makes when there is no one to hear it but itself. I walked toward where the gully was supposed to be. I walked for 40 minutes. I walked with the map in my mouth, the paper of it between my teeth, because my hands were busy holding aside the stalks, and I did not want to put the map in my pocket where I would not be able to feel it. At 6:33, I saw the gully. It was a cut in the earth maybe 4 meters deep and 20 meters across, with the bottom paved in old river stones and the slopes choked with thistle, and the corn coming right up to the lip of the south side, and stopping at the wire that ran along the lip of the north side. The wire was thin and silver and almost beautiful, the way a spider web is beautiful from the right angle. Beyond the wire there were 3 towers, and between the towers the air had the slight shimmer that meant active sensors, and above the air the slight darker shimmer that meant drones, and beyond all of that, very far, the low blue line of the hills that were not the Concord's hills, that were Zellen's hills, that were the free quarter. At 6:30 the wind came. It came down from the north the way Dana had said it would, low and dry and full of chaff, and the corn at the lip of the gully bent and threw its dust out into the air above the sensors. And I watched the shimmer twitch and then quiet, and then twitch and then quiet. And then I heard the small, clean click of a sensor array running its self-call cycle, and I went. I went down the south slope in a slide, on my back, with one hand on the map in my mouth and the other thrown wide for balance. And the thistle tore my coat and one of my palms, and I did not feel it. And I came up at the bottom on my feet and ran across the stones of the dry riverbed with my head down and my knees high. And I went up the north slope on all fours like an animal. And I went through the wire where the wire had been cut by someone, sometime, in some other 28-day window. And the cut had been mended badly and was easy to pull apart, and I pulled it apart and I went through. I was in the kill zone. The kill zone was a strip of land 200 meters wide between the wire and the hills, and I had been told it was a strip of grass, but it was not a strip of grass. It was a strip of bones. Some of the bones still had clothes on them. Some of the clothes I recognized, the cut of a coat from the year I was 16, the kind of boot they had stopped making 4 winters ago. There were bones that were old and bones that were not old, and there was, very near the wire, a body that was not a body yet but a person, face down, in a coat the same green as Durad's, and I did not stop to look. I did not stop to look. I ran. The sensor cycle was 40 minutes. I had 38 of them left when I went through the wire. I had run, maybe, 4 of them when the first drone found me. It came down out of the dark shimmer above the towers like a stone dropped into a well, and the well was the air around my head, and the drone had a small clean tone it made before it fired that was the tone of a kettle just before it boiled. And I heard the tone, and I threw myself sideways into a depression in the ground that was not a depression but a hole the size of a person, made by a person, who was no longer in it. And the drone fired, and the dirt above me jumped. And one of the rounds went through the meat of my left shoulder and out the back of it. And I did not know I had been shot for a full 2 seconds, because the only thing I could feel was the dirt in my eyes. I got up, I ran. I ran with one arm not working right and the other arm tight across my chest. And the second drone found me at the 100-meter line and fired and missed and fired again and did not miss. And the round took me through the side, below the ribs, and turned me half around in mid-stride, and I went down on one knee and got up and went down on the other knee and got up and kept going. And the third drone. There were always 3, Juraj had said. In the wind window there were always 3. The third drone came in low and slow, and the small clean kettle tone was so close I could have put my hand on it. And I did the thing I had decided in the corn that I would do if it came to this, which was nothing brave, which was nothing clever, which was simply to fall forward into the next depression and play dead, and hope the system culled itself before the drone could verify. I fell. The drone hovered. The kettle tone held its note. Then the sensor array clicked its small clean click again, the self-call, the wind, the chaff, the corn, and the drone's tone wavered and went down a half step and then went out. And the drone hung there for one more second, dumb, blind, waiting for instructions that the cycle would not give it for another 33 minutes, and then it drifted up and away on a default pattern toward its tower. I lay in the depression with my face in the dirt and the blood from the side of me running down into the dirt and turning the dirt into a darker dirt, and I counted to 100, and at 100 I got up and ran. I do not remember the next 40 meters very clearly. I remember the hills when the world swung them toward me. I remember the wire when the world swung the wire. I remember stepping on something that was not earth and looking down and seeing the curve of a jawbone, with the lower teeth still in it, lying in the grass the way a child's marble lies in grass. And I remember stepping off the jawbone and putting my foot down, the next foot on a coat sleeve. And inside the coat sleeve there was nothing but the rough shape of where an arm had been, and I remember thinking, I will not be a jawbone. I will not be a coat sleeve. And then thinking, the people who are jawbones now did not think they would be jawbones either. And then thinking, that is not a useful thought. And then forcing the thought back down with the next hum of my mother's song, the 3 notes and the 4 notes and the 3 notes again. And the song was the metronome, and the metronome kept the feet moving, 1 and 1 and 1. I ran the last 100 meters with my hand pressed over the hole in my side, and the hole in my shoulder pouring down the inside of my coat into the waistband of my trousers, and the world had begun to do the thing the world does when you have lost a lot of blood, which is to say it had begun to swing on a long, slow pendulum, with the hills at one end of the swing and the wire at the other, and I aimed for the hills every time the swing went that way, and corrected when the swing went the other way. And I crossed the last line of the kill zone in a stagger, and went down into a ditch on the Zelen side that had been dug, I think, by Zelen on purpose, to catch people like me before they bled out in plain view of the wire. In the ditch there was a man, not a man, a Vethari. A conquered Vethari, in a long pale coat, with a satchel and a wand thing in his hand that he was running over my chest before I even knew he was there. I tried to get up, he pressed me back down. His face had the long jaw and the slow second eyelid and the 4.5 fingers, and his coat had the 7-petaled bloom on the lapel, and I looked at him and I thought, this is where it ends, the whole crossing for nothing, the whole stupid run for nothing. And I tried to say something, but my tongue was thick, and what came out of my mouth was the first 3 notes of my mother's song, the one with no words, and the Vethari's second eyelid slid sideways and back, and he leaned closer. "Lie still," he said in our language. "Lie still, citizen. I am not who you think." He was Vethari, but he was not conquered. He was, I learned later, a deserter. There were such things. There were Vethari who had crossed the wire in their own way, in their own time, who had decided that the 7-petaled bloom was a hand with a finger missing and could not stand to wear it anymore. He had a name I will not write down because he asked me not to, and a clinic on the Zelen side that the Free Quarter had built him out of a barn. And on this day, the 11th of the 10th month, in the wind window, he had been down by the ditch the way he was every 28th day, because he knew about the wind too, and because there was always, in the wind window, someone in the ditch who needed him. He got me onto a stretcher, he got the stretcher onto a cart. He got the cart up the slope and into the back of a truck, and the truck along a track, and the track into a yard, and the yard into the barn, and the barn was the clinic, and the clinic had a table, and the table is where he laid me down and peeled back the field shroud they'd zipped me into and counted, in his own language, the holes in me. We both got to 7 and stopped at the same time, which I took as a kind of agreement. That is where I came in. "Humans don't survive this," he said. He said it twice, the second time quieter. He said it the way a man says a thing he has just learned is not true and does not yet know how to put down. The hole below my collarbone was the one he kept coming back to. He said something in Vethari to himself, something with a click in the middle of it, and then he said in our language, the round passed through the subclavian, "You should be empty. You are not empty. You are," and then he stopped and he looked at my face and he said, "What are you holding?" "What? What are you holding? In your jaw. Your jaw is set. You are holding something behind your teeth." I had been holding the song. I had been humming it without sound, the way I had been humming it since the gully, the way I had been humming it since the kitchen, the way I had been humming it, I realized, my entire life, my mother's song with no words, the 3 notes and then the 4 notes and then the 3 notes again, and it had been the only metronome in the kill zone, the only thing that had kept the swing of the pendulum coming back to the hills. "A song," I said. He looked at me. "A song my mother used to hum." He looked at me longer. "At the sink," I said, "when she washed the pot." The Vethari doctor sat down on the stool by the table. He put the wand thing down on the tray. He took off the field glove on his right hand, the 4.5-fingered glove, and he laid the bare hand on the side of my face, on the temple, the way my mother had laid her hand on my face at the door of the apartment on the morning of the 9th, and his bare hand was warm, which I had not expected, because in all the propaganda the Vethari were said to be cold, biologically cold, lizard cold, but he was warm. He was as warm as a person. And he kept his hand there for a long second, and then he took it away. I have a list, he said. A list of things I do not understand about your species. The list is long. I have been keeping it for a long time. I will add this to it. The song. The fact that the song is keeping you alive. Yes. I will add it. He picked up the wand thing. He turned it on. He went back to work. He worked for 6 hours. He took the round out of the meat of my shoulder, and he took the round out of the side of me below the ribs, and he sewed the subclavian closed with a thread that was not a thread but something that moved on its own under the skin, and he hung 2 bags of fluid above the table, neither of which was blood but both of which were what I needed instead of blood, and the whole time he worked he muttered to himself in Vethari, with the click in the middle of every third sentence, and the click, I came to understand much later, was the Vethari word for impossible. The list, he said, was long. He kept adding to it. When he was done, he sat down on the stool again and he looked at me for a long time, with the slow eyelid going sideways and back, and he said, "You should not be here. On this side of the wire. On this side of the table, on this side of breath. I have treated 4 humans from your zone in the last year. 3 of them died on the table. The 4th died in the bed before the morning. You should be the 5th. You are not the 5th. I have a delivery to make." What? I have a delivery to make. I lifted my good hand and I put it down on my chest, on the place where the inner pocket of my coat had been before he had cut the coat off me, and he understood. And he went and got the coat from where he had thrown it in the corner, and he found the inner pocket, and he found in the inner pocket the thing I had stolen out of the Marshall Street kiosk on the day before I left. It was a Concord medical scanner. Dana had let me take it. Dana had turned her back at exactly the right second and looked at exactly the wrong shelf, and I had taken it off the counter and put it inside my coat and walked out, and Dana had said, "The Concord provides," and I had said, "The Concord provides," and she had not looked at me, and we had both known what the scanner was and what it was for. The scanners were keyed to the central registry. Every kiosk had one. Every clerk used one. Every scan a citizen took, every wrist that was read, every score that ticked up or down, all of it went through the scanner first and was logged on the scanner's internal record before it went to the central registry. Each scanner held 30 days of raw log on its chip. Raw log. Not the cleaned version the Concord released to the free quarter, not the sanitized statistical bulletin the diplomats pushed across the table at the quarterly meetings in Zelen. Raw, with the reassignments, with the score drops on the day before each reassignment, with the destinations of the reassigned, which the citizens did not see and which the Concord said did not exist. I had 30 days of Marshall Street raw log inside my coat. I had Dana's son's reassignment in there. I had Jurad's cousins. I knew, I had not looked, but I knew I had my mother's. I had everyone the Concord said did not exist. I had a delivery to make. The Vethari doctor held the scanner in his 4.5-fingered hand, and he turned it over and he looked at the small green light on the back of it that meant the chip was intact, and his second eyelid went sideways and back twice in a row, which I had begun to understand was the Vethari equivalent of a long, slow breath. This is. Yes. This is the registry. Yes. You ran across a kill zone with the registry inside your coat. Yes. He looked at me. You should not have done that. I had to. You should not have been able to. Even if you should have done it, you should not have been able to. The wounds. My mother's reassignment is in there. He stopped. He looked at the scanner. He looked at me. He looked at the scanner again. He put it down on the tray, carefully. The way a man puts down a thing he has just understood is heavier than he had thought. "Doctor," I said. "Yes." "There is a broadcast tower in the free quarter. There is a man who runs it. He has been waiting for 30 days for somebody to bring him a scanner. He doesn't know it's me. He doesn't know my name. He has been waiting in general. Yes, I have a delivery to make. The Vethari doctor took a long Vethari breath, the kind with the click in it, and he stood up, and he went out of the barn, and he was gone for a long time, and when he came back he had a woman with him, a human woman with gray hair and a braid down her back, and she was carrying a small box of equipment and a face that did not waste time, and she introduced herself as the person who ran the broadcast tower, and she said, "You're the boy with the scanner," and I said, "I'm the boy with the scanner." And she said, "Then let's go to work." They wheeled the table out of the barn with me on it, and into a low concrete shed behind the barn, and in the shed there was an antenna and a console and a chair. And they put me in the chair with the blanket around my shoulders, and the woman plugged the scanner into the console, and the console plugged the scanner into the antenna, and the antenna pointed itself east, over the hills, back across the wire, into the compliance zone, and the woman said, "When it goes out everywhere. Every receiver in your zone, every kitchen radio, every kiosk speaker, every black square on every wall. Every score will show its own reassignment file for 10 minutes before the Concord can pull the plug. 10 minutes is what we have. They will scramble it. They will jam it. They will roll heads in the compliance zone tomorrow. But for 10 minutes, every citizen in your zone will see, in their own kitchen, the file the Concord said did not exist. Including my mother's. Including your mother's, if she has a receiver. She has a receiver. There's a black square on the wall behind her chair. Then she'll see it." The Vethari doctor stood by the door of the shed with his slow eyelid going sideways and back, and he was, I realized, frightened. I had not thought a Vethari could be frightened, but he was. He was frightened the way a man is frightened who has just watched another man do the impossible, and has understood that the door of the impossible is now standing open, and any number of other things might come through it. "Are you ready?" the woman said. "Yes." "Push the green key." There was a green key on the console under my hand. I looked at it. I looked at the Vethari doctor. He looked back at me. He gave the smallest nod, the kind that wasn't a nod, the kind that was a held breath. I pushed the green key. The console made a small clean tone like a kettle. The antenna hummed. The little green light on the back of the scanner went from green to white to green again, and the woman said, "It's going." And the Vethari doctor said something in Vethari with the click in it, and I closed my eyes for the first time since the alien doctor had peeled back the field shroud, and I let myself hum the song, with sound, out loud. The 3 notes and the 4 notes and the 3 notes again, my mother's song with no words, and I hummed it for as long as the broadcast went out, which was 10 minutes, more or less, and somewhere in the 8th or 9th minute of those 10, I felt the hand of the Vethari doctor come down on the side of my face, on the temple, the way my mother's had at the door, and his hand was still warm. The broadcast ended. The Concord jammed it at minute 10 and 12 seconds. We had given them 2 extra seconds because the woman had built the antenna herself and was a stubborn woman and would not be told what minute 10 meant. In the compliance zone, every black square on every wall in every kitchen of every apartment that had a receiver showed, for 10 minutes and 12 seconds, the raw registry of the Marshall Street kiosk, scrolling, name by name, score by score, reassignment by reassignment, destination by destination. My mother saw mine. She did not have a kitchen anymore, but she had a black square in the room they had put her in, and the black square showed the registry, and the registry showed her reassignment, and beside her reassignment in the field marked destination, there were now words where the Concord had always put a dash. She told me later what the words were. I will not write them here. They were the words of a place none of us had known existed, and that, after the broadcast, did not exist any longer, because once a place is named it can be marched on, and after the broadcast there was a march, and after the march there was a smaller compliance zone, and after the smaller compliance zone there was a smaller one than that, and the arithmetic of the Concord changed, finally, in the way arithmetic changes, slowly and then all at once. But that was later. The broadcast went out at 1914 on the 11th of the 10th month, and by 1924 the Concord had jammed it, and by 2200 there were riots in 3 cities of the compliance zone, and by morning of the 12th there were riots in 11. The Concord enforcers, the long-legged ones with the joints that bent backward at the knee, did what enforcers do, which is to say they made the riots smaller in some places and much larger in others. And in the larger places, the citizens learned the thing the Concord had not wanted them to learn, which was that the long-legged enforcers were 30,000 and the citizens were 30 million. And arithmetic of that kind, once it is done, cannot be undone. In the 7 kitchens on our floor of the building on Marshall Street, 7 black squares on 7 walls showed 7 different reassignment files, and 7 mothers and 7 sons, and 7 daughters and 7 fathers, read the destinations and learned the words for the places that had not been words before. And on the morning of the 12th, 6 of those 7 families were on the street with the other families, and the 7th family was the family of a man who worked for the Concord and who, by the evening of the 12th, no longer worked for them, because no one would buy his bread, and a man whose neighbors will not sell him bread is not, after very long, a man who works for the Concord. Dana of the Marshall Street kiosk was arrested on the morning of the 12th and released on the evening of the 14th, because by the evening of the 14th there was no longer anyone in her precinct empowered to keep her arrested, the precinct having become, in the intervening 48 hours, something other than a precinct. She went home. She put the kettle on. She unfolded the photograph of her son that she had kept in the drawer of the till for 9 years, and she put it on the window of the kiosk, facing out, where the citizens could see it. By the end of the week, there were 140 photographs in that window, of 140 boys and girls and mothers and fathers who had been, in the Concord's word, reassigned. And the photographs were not a memorial because a memorial is a thing for the dead, and the citizens of Marshall Street had decided by the broadcast that the reassigned were not the dead. They were the disappeared, and the disappeared could, in principle, be found. Some of them were found, most were not. But the search was a thing now, a public thing, a thing with a name and an office, and the office had a door, and the door was on Marshall Street, and the door had Dana's name on it because Dana was the one who had begun it, in truth, on the day she had said "the wind" to a boy in her kiosk, and had turned her back to the shelf at exactly the wrong second. That was later. On the day of the broadcast, in the shed behind the barn, the Vithari doctor took his warm hand off my temple and looked at me and said, in our language, "I will have to revise the list. The list of things I do not understand about your species. I will have to revise it down. He paused. I had it filed under mysteries. It belongs under something else." Under what? His second eyelid went sideways and back. He thought about it for a long time. Under methods, he said. I laughed. I had not known I could still laugh. The laugh hurt the hole in my side and the hole in my shoulder and the hole under my collarbone that had been sewn with the thread that was not a thread. And I laughed anyway, the small laugh, my mother's laugh. The kettle taken off the fire and put back on, and the Vithari doctor watched me laugh with his head tilted at the angle a Vithari tilts his head when he is filing a thing away, and he was, I think, still afraid. But he was something else too. He was a man, he was a person who had said a sentence at the start of a day, and was no longer the same person who had said it, and he knew it, and he was, I thought, all right with knowing it. I did not see my mother again for 9 months. When I did, she came across the wire in the 7th wind window after the broadcast, on a night when the gully was thick with chaff, and the censors culled themselves for an hour instead of 40 minutes, because the broadcast had broken something in the central registry that the Concord had not yet found a way to fix. She came across with Juraj, who had not died on the 9th, who had been hiding in a cellar in a village 10 kilometers from the wire for 9 months waiting for a wind window he could use to come back across after he had not made it across the first time. And they came together, the two of them, my mother in her good blouse, and the shoes with the heels that hurt her, and Juraj with the small forward lean of a man walking into wind even when there was none. I met them at the ditch. The Vethari doctor was with me. He had a stretcher in case and a wand thing and the satchel, but my mother did not need the stretcher and Juraj did not need the wand thing. They walked out of the ditch on their own feet. My mother put her hand on the side of my face, the way she had at the door, and her hand was cold, the way it had always been, and she said, "Eat your bread, Myro," and I said, "I will, Mama," and Juraj clapped me on the shoulder that did not have a hole sewn shut in it. And we stood there in the ditch in the free quarter in Zelen, with the hills behind us and the wire in front of us. And the Vethari doctor stood a little apart, on the slope, with his slow eyelid going sideways and back, watching the three of us with his head tilted at his Vethari angle, filing a thing away. Later, in the kitchen of the small house the free quarter had given us, my mother washed the pot at the sink, with her sleeves rolled up to the elbow, and there was no black square on the wall behind her, because in Zelen there were no black squares, and she hummed the song with no words, the 3 notes and the 4 notes and the 3 notes again, and Juraj sat at the table eating bread that had real flour in it. And the Vethari doctor sat next to him with a cup of something in his 4.5-fingered hand, and the doctor said to no one in particular, "I am revising the list again," and Juraj said, "What list?" And the doctor said, "It is a long story," and my mother at the sink did not turn around, but the muscle in her jaw moved once. And I knew it was the muscle that moved when she was deciding not to cry, and I knew it was, this time, a different decision than the one she had been making in the kitchen on the morning of the 9th. I am writing this down because the Vethari doctor asked me to. He said in our language on the day I left his barn for the last time and walked back to the small house with my mother and Juraj waiting, "Write it down. The song, the kitchen, the kettle, the bread, the black square on the wall, the hand on the temple, the whole of it. Write it down for the list. The list of things you don't understand. The list of methods. It's not a method, doctor. It's just being a person." He looked at me for a long time, with the slow eyelid going sideways and back. "Write it down," he said, "anyway." So I am writing it down. "Humans don't survive this," he said, on the day I came across the wire. He said it the way a man reads a weather report, flat, certain, already moving on to the next slide. He was wrong. We do. We do, and we hum while we do it, and the song has no words, and the song is the whole of it, and there is a coin behind our teeth that we have been saving our whole lives for a day we did not know was coming, and on the day it comes we spend it, and we keep walking, and we deliver what we said we would deliver, and we go home for supper. Eat your bread.